this twisted here, little scroll.
Welcome to Volume 9 of The Woodsmaster, where we teach you to be the Woodsmaster. My name is Ron Hood, and in this volume of The Woodsmaster, we're going to show you some of the hottest skills you've ever seen in one of the Woodsmaster videos. In this volume of The Woodsmaster, we're going to be showing you how to turn junk into usable tools. Now, this is going to severely broaden your expectations of what's possible under primitive conditions. So long as people are tossing aside materials that they consider to be junk, and you have the skills in this video, you will be able to turn those materials into usable tools and weapons like this one. When we decided to film this topic, we had to look around for the most proficient and primitive masters of metallurgy we could find. And we were lucky. We found them in Tucson, Arizona. They come from an outfit that's called the Neo-Tribal Metalsmiths. Now, the two folks that we found can take things like bottle caps and car springs and old doors and turn them into beautiful works of art, knives, and weapons. When you're finished viewing this video, you're probably going to find yourself pounding on hot steel and making your own knives. Now, your instructors in this video are going to be two gentlemen that I have the most regard for, Tai Gu, Master Metalsmith, and Tim Lively, Blade Master. These two guys are going to lead you through the tips and techniques it takes to turn a piece of steel into a functional knife. Our first instructor will be the famous and amazing Tai Gu. Now, Tai's been stunning the knife-making world since the early 1970s. Let's watch as Tai and assistant Jeff Sanders punch out a nice little camp knife for us in about 3 hours.
Yeah, well, I've got a theory too that the steel is feminine in character. We pursue it, it doesn't pursue us, and it submits to us, but only within its nature. It can't leave its nature. So in a sense, it dictates what we can do with it. But I think men are attracted to it because of those reasons, is that it does have a feminine sort of appeal to it.
That's all just forged from one piece, and then this twisted here and a little scroll just spin around. But I kind of like it because it gives that kind of a springy little feel to it. You'll see on this that it won't, normally what'll happen is all the tension will be right there, and it'll be more likely to break. But see on this, it distributes it through the whole thing. This is just a way to check the hardness of the edge. Well, break it now. Nothing.
Just a little bit of a shine. That cuts pretty good.
Now my phone's ringing. This is the forge here, and what it is basically just a wash tub, and it's full of wood ash. This is all just lined with wood ash, and the nice thing about the ash is you can form it into any shape of a fire cavity that you want, and it's also a really good insulator. The ash insulates the metal here, and the air supply coming in through a pipe here is also insulated by the ash, and it's just a 2-inch steel pipe that comes in that's connected to the blower, and this is the air supply for the fire. So I'm going to go ahead and light it with the newspaper and throw some charcoal in and get it going. Burns the best with local newspaper. Okay.
I think the forged blade has the potential to be a better blade than the stock reduction blade, but it's also a riskier process which requires a lot more skill.
One of the things about the mesquite is it pops a lot when it's fresh. It'll spark and pop a lot. So once you get it lit, you've got to let it sit and cherry out first, just like barbecuing. You want to let the coals sort of cherry out, then they don't pop and spark as much. You can see how it's starting to pop a lot right now. It's barely even lit yet, but once it gets lit, that thing will really jump up. These are pecan shells, and I just get them at the pecan farm. They throw away when they're shelling the pecans. They throw away about a truckload a day. So I just went out there and filled up the truck for free. Threw some pecan shells on there to help get the fire going. And as I'm making the knife and working, I'll usually throw a little bit on there too, just to help add more fuel to the fire, and it'll help keep the charcoal lasting longer. So, okay, now it just needs to sit for about 10 or 15 minutes so the coals can cherry out, and then it won't pop as much when it's burning.
Okay, Ty uses the mesquite charcoal. Here it is in a 40-pound bag. It comes like this here, and you know, it's in pretty big chunks, and we want chunks that are about this size right here, maybe a little bigger if that's okay too. So what we do is here's his pit for charcoal, we just break the stuff up. He ends up getting some waste, but you know, he can use this for barbecuing, or he said there's a way that you can actually make this into chunks. I don't know how to do that yet, but so we're breaking it up here. We're going to fill this bucket up and just have it ready.
This is what I'm going to start with. It's just leaf spring, truck spring, I think. And this is a little piece of the same material that we cut off with a torch. And the first thing we're going to do is just split this and get a little piece out of it to make a knife with. Here's some other things that you could use to make knives with that'll make real good knives. Just some coil springs, crowbar, and axle are all really pretty similar.
If you find a piece of rusted steel out in the woods, can it still be forged into a piece of usable steel?
Yes, it can, as long as it's not rusted all the way through. But once you heat it up and start hammering on it, all that rust and stuff will just pop right off. You can see now how the fire's not popping anymore, that it's just burning real smooth and clean. I'm just going to cut a piece off of there to make a knife out of. That's way too wide, probably a little too long. You have to bear in mind that the metal is going to be stretching, not being ground away. So out of a small piece, it'll stretch into a pretty big knife. It doesn't waste anything. It's more like squeezing clay than it is grinding or anything like that. Okay, that's good enough. All we're going to try to do first is just get a line established.
Every bladesmith works a little bit differently. Some will just simply forge the outline or the silhouette of the blade and then grind the bevels in and do all of the rest of it through stock reduction. That route is a little bit different than what I like to do. I like to forge it as close as possible to shape and remove as little as possible material. Now the main reason for that is it eliminates a lot of the expensive power tools that you would need to do the stock reduction efficiently. You could do the stock reduction with files, but most people will end up buying drill presses, milling machines, belt sanders, and all that stuff. So by doing it with hammers and forging it as close to shape as possible, you can eliminate all those tools. I'm just strictly teaching on a one-to-one personal basis here at my shop.
Yeah.
Let's take some of that arc out of it. Give it about 3 or 4 again. Good. 3 was, well, 4 is fine. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to just heat this side up and break it off. Well, should we make a wide one or a narrow one?
Like a wide one.
All right, let's make a wide one. Okay, the next thing I'm going to have to do is grind this burr off a little bit. You can see that sharp burr from the hot cutting. About all it needs for now, just to get rid of the real sharp edge that was on there. These tongs were made to hold flat bar stock, and it's got a U-shaped jaw on either side so that you can turn the metal and hold it in any direction.
Where do you get up there?
I made these.
You made those?
Yeah.
Okay, what did you make them out of something or from scratch?
From scratch.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I made completely from scratch too. Those are for bending little...
For a student to get started in this craft the way that I teach it really doesn't need to spend any money at all, depending on how resourceful they are.
This is just a homemade anvil, and it's just a solid piece of steel that goes down about halfway into a bucket of concrete. Yeah, I just put the metal back in the fire now, and I'm going to heat it up some and hammer that edge square before I start on the point or any part of the blade. Just squaring it up a little bit.
Nobody really knows exactly what neo-tribal metalsmithing is. We tried many times to define it, and every time we tried to define it, it limited the thing and made it smaller and sort of cut a lot of people out. So now we're sort of just wanting to let the name speak for itself and let everybody sort of interpret that the way they want to.
What I like about doing it on tape is you can edit out all my fumbling around with it.
You think we're going to edit this out?
Oh, this is the good part, huh?
Look, Ty's on fire.
Yeah. He's bleeding and he's on fire already. Okay, we're just going to trim the end for the point off. Now we got it.
Got a little hot, huh?
That was all right.
Oops, we don't want to go through the ammo.
Okay. Now the same thing is I need to grind this little sharp burr off from the cutting. We're just building the fire up again, and we got to let the coals soak again for about 10 minutes, and then we'll get on with the rest of the blade. There are a lot of little psychological games that this kind of work likes to play with your head, you know.
Right.
Well, for one thing, it seems like it's taken a long time, but as compared to like stock reduction or other ways, which you don't get the feeling that it's slow. You get the feeling you're going fast, but if you actually look at the clock, this is a lot faster, you know.
Sure.
But it's a more intense maybe type of a work, physical or whatever, you know. So it seems like it takes a long time, but it really goes pretty quick. Now I'm going to thin the point out a little bit and start working the blade down in cross section. This also stretches it out in length, and if I go this way, it'll stretch it out a little bit in width. Okay, if I use the hammer this way, it stretches it more out in length. If I use the hammer this way, it'll stretch it out more in width. That just gives me a little bit more control on the shape that I make. The brush helps knock some of the scale and slag off of the surface. The ash actually melts over the surface. You can see that wet look to it, and it needs to be brushed off occasionally. Okay, now I'm going to work from the edges a little bit to straighten up the shape. I'm going to hammer with a flat face now to get rid of some of the dents from the other hammer.
We have no official membership in the Neo-Tribal Metalsmiths, but an estimated number is probably somewhere around 300 to 500. They come from all around the world.
I'm going to work on the handle side of the blade just a little bit now.
There's no special membership requirement. We do have a newsletter that they can subscribe to, and we have full moon parties when the full moon falls on a weekend as sort of a social and educational gathering. We all get around and drink beer and forge stuff by the moonlight and have little demos and art sale and stuff like that. And we got our website that people can log on and talk to us on the forum and ask us questions and things like that.
The thickest part of the blade should be right about here, 3 or 4 inches behind the point, and then it tapers from here to the point, and then from here it'll taper all the way back to the end of the handle. And what that does is puts most of the weight or the chopping force up in this part of the blade here, and also if the blade is stressed at this area, it'll distribute the stress evenly through the whole blade rather than focusing at this part here. What I'm going to do now is counter bend this blade. In other words, bend it into the edge so that when I hammer the edge will be getting thinner, it'll be getting wider, and it'll also be stretching out in length. But by counter bending it, as this edge stretches, the blade will actually come back straight as I go. I use a wood block and a mallet to do this part, just to keep from putting any unnecessary dents or dings into the blade. All I'm trying to do right now is bend it. Oh, I gotta do that a couple more times.
For me, I think the reason I started making knives this way really had more to do with the process than the end product. To me, it was just a lot more interesting and a lot more fun, really, than sitting at a grinder just grinding blades out. This allows me to get more intimate with the material, working closer with it with hand tools to try to get a deeper understanding of what makes the material tick.
Okay, I'm starting the bevel right here. I like to get this spot first and then let the whole rest of the edge follow that spot. So I get this pinched in and centered, and then I work the rest of it out this way. And you notice too how that makes the blade get wider there and drop down a little bit. Okay, I'm just looking at the color of the metal to tell when it's ready, and for what I'm doing right now, I'm just looking for an orange heat basically. Right there. Trick is trying to keep this thing even and centered. In other words, to get the same angle from both sides. Alright, that's good for now. I'll go order us a pizza. What I try to do too is kind of keep it orderly where you can see this line where the angle starts, and that sort of gives me another point of reference, okay, to work from. So on the next pass, what I'll do is I'll hit along that line, basically. And what I'll do on the next pass is hammer down that line, and the line will move up to here, you see.
Okay. And then how do you take the little indents out of it?
That'll be done at the end with the finishing hammer, something with a broader, flatter face like that, and that'll help work some of the dents out and stuff.
Gotcha.
Okay? I guess it can go back in now. I'm going to take just a little of the bend out now, right here. There. When the blade starts getting thinner, it takes the heat quicker, but it also loses it a lot quicker, so you can only hit it a few times. As I'm getting closer to the finished shape, too, I'm using lower temperatures than I was in the beginning, and lighter hammer blows, too. After the whole blade's done and you sort of think backwards to what the whole thing went through, it goes through all these little convolutions and stuff before it gets to its finished form. Now it's starting to look more like a knife, huh? Now I'm going to grind some of the little irregularities out of the edge there and just even it up a little bit at this point. And I'm going to do a little bit more of the same, but just working at lower temperatures with lighter blows. Just try to even everything up and straighten everything out. This is part of it. I can do that while I'm driving too. Hold the wheel with my knee. It's always important to have the right tolerance. Because if you can't get a good grip on it, you can't forge it straight. Okay, as we get closer to the finished blade, it gets a lot touchier to where I'm just using really light blows to clean up the edge and get the shape just the way I want it. So we're using real low heats and just a lot of real light little taps on it now. What I need to do now, if you look right here at this part here, it's a little bit off-centered, so I need to knock that little spot centered, and then the whole rest of the edge will follow that spot. That's pretty good. All I need to do now is straighten it out and clean it up a little bit, and then this part will be done. Actually, Ron, I think I'm going to send this blade with you too to play around with. Slap a handle on it or something. I'm trying to get a nice long even heat on that blade right now so I can straighten it out. Pretty close. This gets down to some picky little stuff now. Which I guess it needs a little more of. I guess we'll call this good enough for now, and I'm going to do a little bit of stock reduction on it, and then we'll go to the hardening. So before that though, I think I'll normalize it one time here in the fire. And all the normalizing is just to heat it up to the critical temperature and let it air cool. And what that does is stress relieves it, and it'll make it easier to file and do the stock reduction. So it'll take any residual hardness or stresses out of the metal. It could warp too while I do this part, and if it warps a little bit, then I'll straighten it out, and then we'll get on with the rest of it. Stock reduction just means removing material from the blade. Cool. The tweer is just the air pipe that leads from the blower into the forge. I put this little T adapter in on the end of the tweer for the hardening process that we're going to do in a minute. And what this will do is just blow the air out lengthwise so I can get a nice, even, long heat on the piece for hardening. Now I'm going to put this pipe on top of the charcoal here, and the whole pipe will heat up, and that will give me a cavity to put the blade into to heat it up when I harden it. The pipe also will help distribute the heat more evenly and keep oxygen and oxidation away from the blade itself. I'm just banking this fire with ash a little bit. Get a nice even heat on that pipe. going to grind around the contour of the blade and just take any of the little irregularities out of it and file it a little bit before we harden it. I'm just going to hold it with some tongs here because the blade gets a little bit hot from the grinding, and this will just help keep my hands from catching fire. Now I'm going to file it a little bit over in the vise. This is just to get rid of the grinder marks and straighten out all the angles and the contour of the blade a little bit. I'm just using this so I can clamp the blade tight. And before I scrape it, I usually use just a coarse stone and just take some of the scale oxidation off the surface, because that'll wear the scraper and the file out real quick. This is just a coarse stone, and I'm going to use this to get some of the scale off before I scrape the edge. This is a scraper, and all I'm going to do is scrape all of the little pits and stuff away from the actual cutting edge, because little dips in that area could create little weak spots along the edge. So just to get the edge all nice and smooth. Then I'll file over this a little bit. That's something or what?
I've never seen it like that.
That was worth the trip out right there, huh? It's a real easy tool to make, too. Okay.
You know, knife making is contagious.
No joke. The whole thing is addictive, just like sex.
It is. So you must have heard about Dirty Johnny, didn't you?
Look at the way that just peels it off. Yeah, I made this little one too myself, right here.
Once you learn that trick.
It's an old trick. The Japanese samurai sword use this, and I think it's a multicultural kind of a tool. So. I'm just putting my little chop mark on the tang here. All I got to do now is drill a couple of little holes for the handle, or rivets for the handle. What I look for is just a cherry red, even heat inside of the tube before I put the blade in. This little marker I put in the ground here faces magnetic north, and I always quench the blade facing north in this oil, vegetable oil here, because as the blade cools, the crystals want to pull towards magnetic north, and by quenching it north, the blade will tend to warp less. So, any steel that is galvanized or has some metallic coating on the surface can burn off and create fumes that are toxic and can make you sick. So those should be avoided. I just leave it in until it reaches the temperature that I want, which is just a cherry red, and maybe 1 minute longer, and then it goes into the oil, which is just about now. So if you're ready, first I go in deep. And then I lift it back out just a little bit so the remaining heat in the back can spring temper the middle section of the blade. This is vegetable oil. Then I just go in and out a little bit. Until the back cools off. What this will do is give me a soft back, a spring tempered middle section, and a hard edge. Okay, once the back cools off, you can go ahead and let the whole thing down in there. You can still see the heat coming off of the back of the blade. And I just agitate it a little bit as it cools. You can see the double banded temper line from the quench that I just did. The first one's right here and the second one's right along here. This is the soft back, this is the springy middle section here, and the hard edge section right here. And the file won't really cut it, so we know that we got a good hard blade there. Okay, now we're going to go to the tempering process, which is reheating the steel to a lower temperature to take a little bit of the hardness out, because just as it is now after the hardening, it's brittle. So what the tempering will do would take a little bit of the hardness out and get it to be tough and springy. This could be done in a kitchen oven, a gas oven, or electric oven, but we're doing it in this Weber grill. And I put a little oven thermometer inside of here, and right now it's just a little bit over 350 degrees. So we're going to just set the blade in here facing north and let it bake in here for about an hour. Okay. We've been in the tempering here for an hour, and the thermometer is still right about 350 degrees. So we're going to take the blade out now, and then I'll do the polishing and the finishing and the sharpening, and we'll be all done. Notice a little bit of the straw color from the tempering in these lighter areas here, and that is another indication that the tempering is completed. Now the blade's had a chance to cool off a little bit, so I'm just going to rub it with this stone and stone some of this black fire scale off before I get ready to sharpen it. Now I'm just switching to a finer stone. The first thing I'm going to do is take the blade down with a stone like this while it's clamped up in the vise. And it's a little thick along the edge now, and this is just a quick way to take it right down to the edge and get just the angle I want along this edge before I take the knife to the stone and start to sharpen it that way. So I'll just put a little water on it first. If you ever get a blade that the edge is really in bad shape, this is a good way to just get it back to where you can sharpen it. I'm just going to turn the blade over now and do the other side.
Mama, I love you so much. There you go. This is what I made on my first trip to Ty's shop. Only took me about 20 minutes. Made it out of a railroad track.
Okay, I've got the blade to an edge now, so I'm gonna start working it over the stone. And the stone has two sides, a smooth side and a coarse side, and this is an oil stone. So I'll start with the coarse side. And when I start sharpening, I'm not worried about every little stroke. I'm still just trying to establish the edge a little bit better, and I use a back and forth sort of a sawing motion. Now I'm going to turn the stone over and go to the smoother side. This is just 3-in-1 oil, multi-purpose oil that works fine for honing. Well, I'm getting the edge pretty close to where I want it now, so I'm just going to start going with one stroke on each side and trying to keep the angle the same on both sides. When you sharpen the knife, it's a lot like taking a small slice off of the top of the stone. Now I'm going to switch to a finer stone, and this will help take the slight little bit of a burr off the edge. It's always a good idea to have some worn out blue jeans on to wipe the oil off on. A simple test for sharpness is just a paper cutting test. And the newspaper is a pretty thin paper, so it has to be pretty sharp to cut it. Before we spring test the blade, I just want everyone to notice that the way this blade is designed is the thickest part of the blade is about here, and it tapers towards the point, and then from here it tapers all the way back to the end of the handle. The reason that is when I flex this in the vise, or if you've chopped it into something and you're trying to get it out, it distributes the stress more equally through the whole blade rather than focusing the stress right on this point here. That's about as hard as I can pull it, you guys, with my weight. Now we're going to test the edge, and I clamp the blade with the edge up in the vise, and I have it padded with a little piece of suede. This is just a little 1/4-inch piece of round mild steel. And as you can see, there was hardly any damage at all to the edge. It just burnishes it a little bit, a little shiny spot there. If the blade was improperly heat treated, it would either bend over or chip out just a little bit.
You might have noticed when Ty did the bending test that he stood behind the blade. That's because if it does happen to break, it's going to blow steel out away from you. You don't want to stand in front of it and get gutted. Another thing is keep your friends and dogs out of the way as well. So if you're pulling on it, pull from behind. Don't push it. Another thing you might have noticed that Ty did is he did the bending test before he put any kind of a handle on it. He did that for a reason. If the blade does break, of course none of Ty's blades ever do break, why the handle be on there would have wasted a whole lot of time. But when you're making a blade, you want to make sure that you don't put your handle on until after you've tested the blade thoroughly.
Now the blade's finished and ready for a handle.
Okay, this is one of my anvils, and a friend of mine helped me make it. It's a section of railroad track that I got from him, and I had him weld it on an axle. Okay, and the axle is actually bolted to a wheel hub. and you know, he did the welding bracket for me. I like it. I heard that if you put magnets on the side, it won't ring as much because it's way too loud for me to use right now. It's got a big ring to it. I tried to mute that out by putting this on, but it didn't help at all. So I'm going to try some magnets on it, and then I'll start using this more. Okay, this anvil here, actually I really like right now because it's mobile. It's pretty heavy. It's filled with cement. It's actually just a piece of track too that I cemented in tomato can. The cement is starting to crack. I'll see how long it lasts. But as you notice, it doesn't ring hardly at all. And I don't want to make my neighbors upset here with this, so I'm using this one a lot right now. I can put it wherever I want it. This is my forge. After going out to Tim's house and realizing how simple a forge could be, I realized I didn't have to spend any money at all to make a forge. Basically what I have here is 2 tin cans, soup can size, taped together, and there is a 1-inch pipe going into that can and sealed off with duct tape. And 1-inch pipe runs underground to my tweer, which is here. And what I've done is I've lined a depression in the ground with ashes and piled lava rock over it. And I like to have an exhaust on it, so I use some old chimney pipe. I can smoke hides with all the smoke that goes through, and it helps create a draft underneath. My air supply is basically just a hair dryer. That's why I did this. I could put the hair dryer in there. I taped this off so the warm air, it's cold air only. And I put that in like that and turn it on. On low is usually enough. I've really never used high unless I'm trying to clean out the tube, and it works great. What's great about learning to do this is that you can make all your own tools. My first lesson with Ty was actually just a punch. This is actually, or a chisel, and this was made out of truck coil. He showed me how to unravel the coil, and we hardened this and tempered it, and I use this all the time still. It's starting to mushroom out, but I use it all the time to cut up my leaf springs. I needed fire tools to help with the coals for poking the coals and moving the coals around, raking the coals, so I just used rebar. Did some, decorative twists in it, and made these tools here, which I use all the time. These two really are my favorite. I don't really use this one a whole lot. I'm trying to make some tongs, which is just kind of work in progress with the rebar. We'll see how that goes. I really like Ty's tongs where you can hold the blade in there like that, and so I'm trying to make some tongs for that. These are some tongs, luckily, that I found. Need a pair of flat ones. Ones like this, that's for holding round stock like that, and then a pair like this, and that's for holding your long pieces of steel to put in the fire. You don't necessarily have to have them. You can use vice grips, all sorts of things. Just use your imagination, and just a hammer. I bought a bunch of hammers, but all right now I'm using is this one. This is really all you need to get started right here. Okay, it's getting great. It's good. Now I'm just gonna work on this piece of, it's a little warm. I'm gonna work on a piece of steering stabilizer that Ty gave me. I'm just basically flattening it out. I'm gonna make a knife out of this. So I'm gonna put that in there and just hammer on that for a second. Put it in like that. Then I crank this on. I'm just checking it for heat right now. It still needs to sit in there a little bit. As we work the metal more, it gets hotter quicker. This initial heat takes just about a minute or so. There's pretty good heat right there. It's hard to tell in the daylight, but I can draw this out really long now. This anvil works great. I get lighter as it gets cool. I use less heavy strokes. Here's some knives that I've been working on since I started with Thai. These two here are actually made from a railroad spike just like this that you can find all over here. I pounded out the head of it flat. I think they're cool because I could probably use this as a hammer. And did a twist, decorative twist on them. These are pretty much done except for heat treating. This one I forged, it looked just like this. I wanted to see if I could take one all the way down, 100% shiny. I've still got more work on this. I'm doing it on a belt sander, as well as my little pointer here. Here's a cool little one, idea that I stole from Thai, a little self-handled thing. I love this little idea here. And these are some I'm still working on. This is one I made for my son. And these two aren't completed yet. This is my favorite so far because this one Thai's actually helped me with, and this is hammered out almost to the edge, so I'm digging this one the most right now.
On this knife here, how long did it take you to make that thing?
Probably about 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours. It's pretty good. It's got a real good edge on it too. I was checking it out.
Oh, this is a sheath that I got from Eric Nolichin. He lives up in Canada. Fits my rucksack perfect. Love it.
Oh, man, that's a really good idea. So it just hangs around your neck like that?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. All sounds good, man. Now it's time to go to a party, huh?
Our next instructor, Tim Lively, has a different way of working with steel. Though much of what you've seen with Thai is consistent in Tim's work, Tim is, he's done a few things differently. For instance, he doesn't use any electricity. In fact, he doesn't even use matches to start his fires. Tim has pushed the frontiers of primitive knife making forward. You're also going to meet his wonderful wife, Marion, who shares his interest in knife making.
I started making knives in high school in 1974, and I started getting serious about it for another few years and decided to go full-time in 1992. I started off just doing stock removal, $1,000 grinder, the drill press, the sanders and all, sending them off to the heat treaters and all that, and doing pretty well at it. And then I ran into Tai Gu, and he just rocked my world with his style of bladesmithing, and I started forging. And it was right about then he came up with the neo-tribal metalsmithing vision and getting back to the basics and being more intimate with the work. So I learned all my forging from Tai. I just started off with the attitude of going primitive, being more basic with everything. I start off with leaf spring and just set it over an open fire and cut it up all together in one day, usually with some friends because it's just hot, heavy, hard work. And then after I've got them into chunks about this size, I'll go ahead later and split them up into something like this. You can tell this one's been hot cut along this edge. And then once I've got this basic form, I'll hot file it, take off this edge, beat it into a form that's more usable for a wide variety of knives, and I'll just have different little blanks like this laying around for my stock. Some of them I'll go ahead and go a little bit further, but this is more usable in a wide variety of knives. I use these tools here to cut up the leaf spring. It's good for about 5 or 6 blows, and then it'll start tearing you up. But it's just a chisel and a massive hammer. And it's just you want to get through that hot chiseling work as quick as you possibly can. This basic shape here has been found in many cultures throughout the world. You'd find it in bronze and copper and iron, and they'd use it as money. And this is what we'll be starting off with. And I'll forge this into an average size hunting knife. And this is 5160 out of 57 Dodge half-ton leaf springs. This is a basic post vise. They make them a lot fancier, a lot nicer. I picked this one up for 75 bucks, which is about the going rate. This is the back side of the Venturi. It's just stovepipes going down different reducers, choking it down, and it goosenecks into the ground. I've got a little dampener here that just controls the airflow somewhat, and it goes into a a 5-inch double wall stovepipe, then goes into a 3-inch double wall stovepipe, and then eventually winds up into this pipe here, which is just a 2-inch pipe. This is a T, and this is just a nipple coming off the side. I can also put another nipple going off this way and use a full forge. Today I'll just be using this as a half forge, so I'll save on fuel consumption. The air just travels down through the venturi and pulls through here using the fire as draft. So you've got a whole flue system happening to where you don't need any kind of a power source whatsoever to keep the fire lit. The venturi's not strong enough to create a forging temperature on its own, so I've got this antique old blower here, hand crank blower, to bring the temperature up to the forging temperatures that I need. It's just wide right here underground. The venturi comes along through here, and this just taps into it in a Y section. So when the blower's being used, it's also pulling air through with the venturi, so it gives you a lot of air with little effort. Hand making my fires, mostly just for fun. The whole non-electric, non-gas, I guess I could use a match, but anyway, I use the char cloth and some old jute rope to start my fires. Pretty much just for fun, really. I don't know what kind of rock this is. I just walked around with my file and just picked up different rocks until one sparked. It's not flint, maybe chalcedony, I'm not sure. But anyway, I just spark it on some char cloth, put some jute rope on it. Add some tinder. And in a week and a half, I just get a little fire going. And then just set it down in there. Now if you tried to stick a fire in just a hole this deep, it wouldn't do much. It'd probably just smother and go out fairly quick. The venturi right now is sucking air through it. The fire pulls what it needs out of there. There's no electricity, there's no blower going right now, but the fire's kicking right in there. Once I got the fuel going and it starts smoking on me like that, then I can go ahead and kick in the blower. For the steel to get up to forging temperature or critical temperature, the way I gauge that is with a magnet. Steel always comes with different specs on the proper Fahrenheit temperature ranges that it's forged at. A lot of smiths judge the steel by the color of it. The magnet never lies. If you're in different ambient light, the color will look a lot different to you. The magnet will tell you the right temperature every time. As soon as the steel becomes non-magnetic, you've arrived at the bottom end of the critical temperature. This is just a broken speaker magnet in a pair of vice grips to gauge the steel on its temperature range, and this is plenty hot. See, it became non-magnetic. Up here it's still sticking. Down here it's non-magnetic. This is the proper forging range. It's usually an orangish color. Blacksmithing books will call it every color under the sun. You know, they've got, you know, the color of dove's wings at sunset or whatever. The magnet will tell you what color it is. I let it get a little cool, so I'll bring that back up to forging temperature. And now that I've got a gauge, I don't need to check it with my magnet every time. I'm in the same light, so I just kind of get that same color every time and I forge away. I will use the magnet again when I come to the heat treating process, just to make absolutely sure I'm at the right temperature range. First, I beat in a small bevel line. That'll be my edge. I'll taper the back a little bit just to keep that tip from shooting up in the air. Not supposed to drop it. For this next step, I get it pretty well evenly heated all the way across. And counterbend it in the opposite direction of the final shape. I mean, I might have it bent this way a little bit in the end, but the blade naturally wants to curve up when you hit it on the edge. So what I'm doing here is kind of counter bending it one way, so that as I'm beating on the edge and it starts straightening out, it just won't flip up all the way where I don't want it. This tool here is just for counter bending my blades, or I can flip it over and use this side as just for a round anvil. I don't know what it is. It's just a part I found at the salvage yard. It was 15 cents a pound. I think it cost me $3.50. So, you know, there's just a lot of things that you can find at the salvage yard that you can put to good use. First thing you need to do is kind of control your tip. You try to hit on both sides fairly even amount. And I'm starting my bevel in, leading it in. I don't want any random blows above my bevel line because I want to have a nice clean ridge. Most beginners should start with a 3-pound hammer. The 4-pounder really will wear you out quick, and it takes a few years to get used to it. But after a while, you'll want to use a 4-pounder just to move the material a little bit faster. We've gone round and round over the debate of gas versus charcoal, and their usual complaint is how much charcoal you burn. But actually, I'm only burning about maybe 4 or 5 pounds an hour at the most, which equates to about, I spend maybe about $8–10 when I buy it a day of fuel, which is cheaper than gas, and it's not a whole lot slower. You'll wear yourself out with a hammer anyway if you've got the rapid heats and you're forging. You can last me, or at least me, I can last maybe 4 or 5 hours hammering that way. With this setup, I've got enough breaks in between where I can still forge 8–10 hours a day if I need to. Yeah. If you hammer in here, going this direction, you're pushing the metal that way. Or you can hammer towards you, and that keeps the tip pretty much in place. Notice the tip's not traveling upwards. But if I hammer towards it, it tends to want to push the tip upwards. So it's just manipulating the steel into the shape you want. Keeping it straight through each heat helps so it doesn't get a weird kink on you. And eventually I'm going to work in a ridge. By pinching in the back a little bit and meeting it into my bevel, I'll get a nice crisp ridge going. Whereas you normally would get that in grinding. I've been blessed with some great masters and teachers in my career, and Ty is probably the #1 mentor in my career life. And he looks at things a lot differently than me. He compares bladesmithing to having sex. Well, I can't really follow that whole notion. To me, it eliminates everything else in the world. You know, I can focus on just knife making, and I don't have to think about what's happening anywhere else. You know, it's just me and my little, you know, focused area of work. You know, it's just what turns my crank. When the edge is still pretty thick like this, I can do this. I can get away with this. Once it starts getting a little thinner, I won't be able to hit it on the edge like that. And I don't like the way my tip is starting to go upwards, so I'll start doing that a little bit more and taking that bend out, working this back a little bit more so I get more of a drop point. I just threw in a chunk of mesquite, and that's why all this spark's coming up. I've got like a half-half mix of the ash wood that I was using that I made in my fire pit and doused with water, and it hardly sparks at all. The commercial mesquite does this, you know, just gets wild on you, and it makes it really hard to forge on. I heated up the other end this time to start a tang. Just nub it off a little at a time so I don't get too much. And I'll draw that out as I go. You just keep working it till you get a tang as wide, as long as you need it. Just pinch a little bit more when you need more. But you start small and then work into the blade like that. And that will dictate where your choil, where your edge starts and everything else. So you're stretching out the blade to where you like it, then stretching out your tang the way you like it, and you can kind of compromise in the middle as you go. With a lot of experience, you'll start knowing that a chunk of steel this size will equate into a 10-inch overall length hunter. Which is about what this will become. It started off at about just under 7 inches, so it'll grow about 3 inches through the whole process. You can see it just takes a while, but eventually you'll get something going out there long enough. Generally I shoot for about 4 3/4 inches long on my tang. That gives me enough to go all the way through the butt cap.
What is a tang?
This part here is the tang. It'll draw through and go through the handle material. You won't see it. It's covered up with whatever you're using, stag or wood or whatever, and it's directly behind the guard inside the handle. This would be a hidden tang. I didn't really pinch off enough on that last one, so I'll go ahead and add some more to the tang area. That's pretty easy to just make it a little bit more. No big deal. Just keep stretching it out till you need more. Pinch off some more. Just keep going. Slightly, eventually you want to wind up with about 4.5 inches and tapering down to the tip. So that if you're going to use a guard on it, you can it'll slide up of it. It's still pretty much the same width all the way through it, but eventually I'll have it tapered that way. It'll also taper towards the tip, it'll taper towards the edge, and then it'll have a slight taper going towards the back. So it's got all kinds of compound tapers happening, and it's all just a matter of your preference of the geometry of the blade. Neo-tribal metalsmithing it's a hard one to define. It started out as kind of a loose organization where we wanted to get back to the primitive aspects of metalsmithing and bladesmithing and steer away from just grinding everything away. We wanted to get more intimate with the work, and it seemed the easiest and most likely way to get into it is almost work in reversal. Get more primitive, start learning the old world techniques that we've basically forgotten. And it's an attitude of hand craftsmanship and the use of salvage materials and just thinking more basically and more primitively instead of solving all of our problems with a machine. Just beating steel to the shape you like it, staying at a certain temperature, and keep going till until you're happy with the shape you've got, and then you're ready for heat treatment. That's where the real magic is in bladesmithing. It's all in the heat treat. The magical qualities that you instill in hammering are questionable. The heat treat might take away all of it. There's a lot of arguments over that, over the qualities of the forged blade, but I think most of it, although there might be some that you instill by forging, I think most of it is put into the knife during the heat treatment process. Okay, this is the back I'm working on, just to keep that tip going down. Getting a little crusty on me. You can also wet your anvil and wet your hammer, and it's known as wet forging, and that'll release some of the scale off the side of the blade. I don't like it because it cools the steel off so quick that I can't get anything done. And the little pits and blemishes on a hammer finished blade, to me, is just character. You know, it's not crudeness to me. It shows what the smith has been able to do with his hammer and the skill in his arm instead of what he can do with a machine. So I like leaving mine with a hammer finish just to show what I can do with my hammer as opposed to what I can do with a grinder. You can start to see I'm getting a ridge going, barely right there. And I just keep doing that, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, till I get it nice and crisp. You beat it in from this way a little bit, and you beat it in from that way, and you're creating, you're pushing the steel up into a ridge in the middle, which seems to be a stronger geometry in my mind, having a slightly tapered back, a tapered edge, and having all the meat, or the spine of the blade, running like 2/3 of the way up. Seems a lot stronger in my mind. So the only rules in art are the rules that the artist imposes on himself. Right. Well, I've imposed the rules of working without gas and without electricity, and that has caused me or enabled me to become more intimate with my work. The thinner the blade gets, the more delicate that edge becomes. You don't want to burn it. That's the only real danger to the steel is when you're forging on charcoal is getting it too hot and burning the steel. If you burn it, it's wasted. It's not reclaimable. You either have to grind it all off or start over. So when you're getting close to the finished edge, you slow way down. You keep the heats at a little bit less of a heat going on there. See, I've got more of a dull red than what I had before. You can see I've got a ridge going through there. It's kind of hard to see, but under there somewhere there's a ridge. Kept the nose down, so I've got a drop point. This area here is a choil, and I'll be filing on it, and it's ready now to be annealed. The next process is to anneal it, to soften it, to get all the stress out of it. This will put it in the softest state that I can get it in, so now I can file on it, fit up my guard, get the tang exactly the right length for the handle. If I leave it a little long, I can either hot cut or hacksaw some of it off to shape. Now, any time I need to do any kind of filing or sanding or anything, it's at its softest state after it comes out of the annealing process. It's the time to do it, and then I can heat treat, because after heat treatment it'll be too hard to really do any kind of file work or anything to it. This buoy I made is out of the same half-ton 57 Dodge leaf spring that I was working with earlier. And it's the same type of design, to where I've tapered the back some and then beveled the to the edge, so I have a ridge going down it, and that is the thickest part of the blade. And I've left a hammer finish on it. And this guard is made out of mild steel, just 1018. You can find tons of it at the salvage yard. I guess this is sort of called a trailing tip, where the tip kind of slightly goes up above the back, would be a term that they use for describing this style of knife. This area here is the choil. It's really where the edge begins. It's the place where sharpening would start. This area here is called the ricasso. Usually that's where you'd have the name. I stamp mine over here, but normally they'll put the name right on the ricasso part. I've got a copper spacer, and this is a hidden tang construction. So the tang of the blade goes through the guard, through the spacers, through the handle material, out the back of the butt cap, to where you can see the tang itself has been peened over on the butt cap. So when I'm assembling the knife, the guard's been soldered. I put all the pieces together and then compress it by ball peening, hammering on the tang, and it mushrooms it out and holds the whole thing very securely together. There's no pins in it. There hasn't been any drilling involved. I did drill a pin that goes through this guard for extra strength, and I just use a nail. You know, I drilled the hole first, put a nail in as a pin. You beat on it and peen it over, and it swells up inside the hole to where you cannot see where that pin is anymore. So it becomes a very, very strong and lightweight tool when you're finished, because even though it's not one piece, it balances out and acts as one piece with that tang running through it, everything pinned together, everything compressed. It's all sealed up, and a knife like this will last generations. The blade now is completely forged to its final shape. It's been annealed, slow annealed in the forge, in the ashes and the coals, and it's as soft as I can get it now at this stage. So I've done little file work here and there, cleaned up my choil a little bit with a file. Less than 5% of the material has been removed so far. Due to stock removal by using files. I'm going to fit a handle up to it and get everything nice and square the way I like it while it's still soft, and then I'm going to heat treat it. I use a little chunk of flagstone or sandstone just to take off the major stubborn spots of scale. And you can see the edge and the ridge starting to pop through all the scale. So now I can just keep going, a little sandpaper, a rock, whatever it takes to get all the little stubborn scale and stuff off. You clean it as much as you want to at this stage, and to get the rest of this stubborn scale off, you can soak it in white vinegar. White vinegar will pop all the scale off, but won't hurt the steel. It's about the easiest way to get the scale off that I've seen. You can sand on this for hours. It's real stubborn stuff, but the white vinegar will pop it right off in a matter of hours. You can really pound with a buoy made out of 5160. It's got good flex. You can get a good hard edge with it. So right now, that's what my favorite steel is.
So close. Well, then I'll swipe it just one too many times and it'll be all wiggling around. Yeah. I'm going to heat this blade up to non-magnetic, nice and even. And then I'm going to quench it in that tank over there that's got automatic transmission fluid in it. And that's the hardening process. It's already been annealed. There's 3 basic steps to the heat treating process: annealing, quenching or hardening, and tempering. Annealing, which we've already done, it's to soften the metal, to get it all the stress out of it that we've hammered into it. Now we're going to go to the quenching or hardening step. I heat the blade back up to non-magnetic, nice and even, and I quench it in the
automatic transmission fluid, and then after that we'll temper it. So right now I'm just bringing it up to a nice even non-magnetic heat. Bring it up to a nice even heat and keep checking it with your magnet. It's non-magnetic. Then you're at the critical temperature. As long as it's nice and even, you're ready to quench. Now, this is just automatic transmission fluid, the cheap stuff. I like it because it has a flash point just above critical temperature. So if you get it too hot, it'll catch on fire, and you know you've didn't do the heat treating as well as you could have. So you can start over with annealing. I just leave it in there till it gets pretty cool. Now it should be fully hardened. I'll check this with a file along the edge to see if the file skates across the edge. And that'll tell me if it's gotten fully hardened or if there's any soft spots or what. Okay. Looks straight, didn't warp. So now I'll just let it cool to air temperature, and it'll be ready to be tempered. Throw it in the dirt a little bit, get all the automatic transmission fluid off. And that's the quenching cycle. I clean it off real nice so I can see the tempering colors for the next step. You don't have to get it real clean, just good enough so you can see the bare metal so the colors will show up. So I make a groove in the earth, just a shallow little groove with a old beat up hatchet, and set my edge down into it. Put a little bit of loose stuff in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it with some real thick, heavy-ended tongs that are heated up in the forge, and I'm going to pinch the back with these hot tongs and temper the back and pull it up a little bit as I do that and let the heat travel down towards the edge. And I'll leave it in the dirt when it gets too hot in a spot to suck the heat out of it so it won't get too soft. So now all I have to do is heat up the tongs, and then I'll grab the back. That thing's so thick it takes a while to heat up. You can barely see a straw color starting to come down it. You can see the back has turned a little blue. Works good. So I'm getting a blue in the back, and it's traveling down to like a light straw to maybe a I like to get the tip just a little bit because it's usually the weakest part of the blade. People don't realize how much pressure you can exert on just the very tip. So if you temper that a little softer, it'll hold up to abuse a lot better. You can do the same job with like a big chunk of steel or copper or whatever. All it is just something really hot that you're touching the back with. Okay, now the blade's done. It's finished. It's everything except for the sharpening, and we'll save that for the very last. Now for the handle, I've got a piece of walnut that's been burned and filed and drilled through and everything, and then with a wood rasp, I've just kind of given it a basic shape so far. And then I've got a copper cap that goes on the end that'll snug on up there and everything when I do the final assembly. And then the tang goes all the way through that, and with a little bit of pressure
And a hand.
but anyway, I'll leave it a little bit to where it can be when the final assembly, and I'll have the primitive epoxy in it and everything, I can snug it on up there so it's a real nice tight fit up against all this copper. And then I'm going to put a copper butt cap on the end, and I need to flare this out some more and make it thinner, and I'm going to mushroom it out around the edge so that it'll make a cap also. And then I'll file off the back side of the mushroom that I've created on the edge, so all you have is like a little domed cap on the end, and then I can peen the tang over. So right now I'm going to go ahead and glue most of this with some primitive epoxy. I'm going to heat up some pinyon pine pitch and deer dung as for an epoxy, and I'll just get this part on there so it's nice and stable, and then I can do the rest of my rasping and everything and finish my butt cap and put it on. So next is the epoxy. Okay, now I go to the vise and tap it on in there.
Awesome.
I used a little WD-40 to get all the pine pitch and deer dung solution, primitive epoxy, whatever, off of the blade and kind of clean it up. It's pretty tough stuff and creates a great seal. getting an even amount of space around the whole handle area with this copper, and I'm going to leave like a little 1/8 inch or whatever sticking out so I can mushroom it over to make a cap. But it's got to be the equal amount all the way around so that the mushroom would be the same all the way around. I'm just mushrooming over the edge. See, I've got it where there's a little lip sticking out all the way around, and I'm going to mushroom it over so it'll create like a little cap, and then I'll file off the mushroom part around this outside. Using the ball peen hammer to mushroom over the end of the tang so it holds everything on there. The tang has been peened over just to hold everything in place. Now I can go ahead and file this little lip I've got off and round it over a little bit, make it a little prettier, clean it up a little, and then I'll clean up around this edge too with a different hammer. Filing off the outer lip that I've mushroomed over. I'm just peening over the inside lip to match it up to the wood, and then I'll clean it up, sand the handle a little bit. That ought to be pretty much done except for sharpening.
I pulled another. Come on. Ow! Oh yeah, play that harp. Got it made. Got nobody for nothing. I can't get it on my own. You don't like the way I'm living. You just leave long hair, got your ball on.
There you go, Mary. There's a bee right there.
Lay around in the shade, kinda like my old blue.
As far as I know, there's only a few professional knife makers that are women in the industry. Marion, my wife, has been making them off and on now for about 8 years. And she's professional sometimes, and then she goes back to work doing something else until she gets it all in her head the way her vision needs to be, and then she'll go back into it full time. Not nearly as many women involved in the knife making industry. It seems like there should be.
I made my first knife in 1994. I did it full time for about 1.5 years, but mainly I'm just doing it part time now. I've gotten into making jewelry too. This is an idea that I had for making jewelry, where if I could change the angle of the anvil whichever way I needed. If I wanted to use, like, say, copper sheet or any kind of material where I wanted something domed, I'd use it on here, and hammer on here like this. I use a nail to get it good and tight in there. I can just take it out real easy, just like that. If I don't need that there, and it's to get it out of the way. This one's in permanently. It's there for good. That one here. This one is good, if you're forging hot steel or copper, whatever. This part of this stand is a cast iron pipe, and it's got adobe patched onto the outside of it. It's domed inside with the bowling ball sitting down inside it, so it can swivel around in any position I need it to be in. These are two of the knives I've made. They're made from W2 tool steel, which is the same as just a file, an old file that was no good anymore. I took it, forged it to shape. This is less than 10% stock removal on these blades. It's called a friction folder because it's got a pin here that is tightened to where there's friction on it so it won't come open. Once you get it open, this here stops on the back so it won't go all the way, won't go any farther. You can see where I added some extra artistic touches to it. Here on the back, this tang is made longer this way so that when it opens, it'll stay in the open position and not go through the handle. I did also some file work on the back here. With the curl, you just work it on the edge of the anvil, working it until it starts to curve.
What is it you're making here?
The bracelet. It's out of copper.
Well, here's the finished knife, 5160 blade, copper ferrule, butt cap, walnut handle, all made without any electricity, any commercial gas or epoxy. Quit flashing me back there.
I missed it. Ron already flashed us one today, man.
Marion's back there. Thanks, guys.
All right.